Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm joined with Danielle O'Connell, who is the Director of Emerging Technology at Skanska. My name is Lauren Lake, co-founder and COO of Bridget. We're a construction software company, and so I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about construction tech in general with Danielle and learn more about Danielle's career coming into the construction industry and entering the construction tech space. So thanks for joining us, Danielle, and happy to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
So we're going to dive into some questions and just talk about your career. You've had a really interesting career path and a lot of success. So I think it's really interesting to dive into some of the things that you've done in your past and just how it's led to the role that you're in today, which is an up and coming space within a lot of general contracting companies. So early on, you were a project coordinator and project manager. What do you think made you successful in those roles as you started your career in the construction industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was an architect by degree out of school, and I came to construction knowing that I loved the built environment, but I didn't really know where I fit in. And I had this in my head that I had to go back to school and get a civil engineering degree and then, tackle a PE role or something. So I think I was just very eager to learn, and I was lucky to be surrounded by great people that I could learn from. So I think the other thing I was able to do is get exposure to different people, different departments within an organization. And a couple of organizations that I worked with, I really got to dabble in pre-construction and look at master planning and work on our design build projects. The list was endless. So I think as I just continued to grow, I was not afraid to ask questions and make sure that I understood how inner workings of all the several different departments I was touching worked together.
Did you always see a future for yourself in the construction industry, or was it something that happened more organically over time?
It was more organic, I think. It was funny when I was finishing my degree in architecture. I just loved buildings. I loved to draw, and I thought that was a good fit. But and especially in the role that I'm in now, I don't know if I would have ever pictured myself here because it didn't really exist when I joined the industry either. And like I said, I was always trying to figure out and navigate like where I fit in because I felt like an odd duck. But I know now that was silly because I work with people who have, history degrees and political science, and it can be anything really. But yeah, so I guess I didn't see myself here at all. I'm glad to be here. And it happened definitely organically and just through exposure to all different things throughout my career.
Yeah, I think my business partner and I are the same way. Not that we're working within a general contracting company, but we're still in the construction space. And it definitely wasn't something that I really saw myself doing earlier on. And then I think just doors started to open and just kind of took advantage of the different opportunities as they presented themselves. And
Right.
I feel like a lot of the time people worry a lot about planning for the future when I think often you end up just following a path that you maybe would never have imagined or didn't even know existed before. So
Exactly.
it is important to stay open-minded.
Yeah.
Do you think when you made that transition from being in more of a project manager role into the technology space, can you explain a little bit about what that looked like? Was that something that you had kind of put your hand up for, or how did that transition happen?
Sure. So most of my early career, went from that project coordinator role to this BIM and VDC role when there was a need that came from our clients starting to ask for it. And we really needed coordinators. And so I think I was always drawn to technology. I always loved modeling. Like I remember in college, we had a TA for our architecture studio who would teach us how to use Revit on the weekends because ArchiCAD was what we had at school. And he was like, there's this new thing that we're using. So it was brand new. It hadn't been acquired by Autodesk yet. And so on Saturdays, we would like go to the architectural firm's office and learn how to use it.
Oh, wow.
So I always just had a passion for technology. So I would say, when I moved into a PM role, I wanted to be like a BIM enabled PM. And that was my ask of my first company. And they were kind of like, we don't know where that fits. And so when I moved on into my PM role, that was something that I focused on. I wanted to make sure that I could leverage the model and still run coordination meetings, but also manage the contractor scope of work and understand the schedule and the cost better, like the true PM side of things. And so that led for me into this role at Massport, where I was design technology integration manager. And it was kind of like looking at more full picture, right? I was getting involved during the design process, working with our design partners, with our consultants, with our engineers, and trying to implement technology in BIM and VDC on our projects very early on, right? And I'm talking like just at just the thought of the project, right? We were talking about, okay, that's great. Well, how are we going to model it? And we were starting to look at inefficiencies in the way we were doing things around like using SketchUp, because SketchUp is
Right.
an awesome tool to, do a nice rendered walkthrough and really show off what we were hoping the space would look like. But how then do we, convert that to our Revit models, which were becoming our drawings? And, we have right now we were looking at, or I guess at the time, we were looking at two different platforms that were working on simultaneously, but they weren't getting, to the same place. So how could we create more efficiency in doing it differently, or using a different tool, or how do those things start to work together? And so yes, I took that role at Massport, and I think it just really opened my eyes to like full life cycle, and that was something I was missing, I think, in just the construction side.
Right.
um, but yeah, I think from there, though, there's so much field experience that it was like boots on the ground experience that I took to that, and I enjoyed just also working with our design teams, our construction teams in the field, and meeting on site and looking at our construction schedule and just figuring out ways to either plug in technology or to improve our BIM and VDC work that we were doing. And so while I was in that role, we published our BIM standards for the organization. And there was a lot just in the state of Massachusetts at the time around like, who else was publishing BIM standards? How was it going? And so we were doing these check-ins with some of the organizations across the state to understand how they were all implementing BIM and VDC, lean practices at the time, right? And so that really evolved and actually got me exposed to the group that I'm with now at Skanska. And it's sort of really why I ended up where I am today. But we were bringing consultants in to do a lot of the work that I do today. While I was at Massport, and we hired the Skanska team that I currently work for as one of our consultants. So that's a
Wow.
little bit how I ended up in this role.
And what does your role, so you're the director of emerging technology.
Mhm.
What is your main focus? What are the things that you're doing day to day, and kind of your main responsibilities in that role?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's a lot. Um, it right now we're looking at BIM and VDC across the organization. I think it's been interesting. There's data is everywhere, and we're trying to figure out all of these tools and technology we use, BIM and VDC, plus our other tools. Like, how does this all help us be more efficient, and how do we save time and money on our projects? That's always like the end goal, right? Um, so my role on our emerging tech team, I'm one of 4 directors right now. So we have 2 regional directors who are really overseeing like BIM and VDC work, and then myself and another colleague of mine on more of our services side. And so really what I think we're focused on is the structure around getting innovative ideas to come to fruition, right? So how does someone come to us with an idea and say, or a problem, I should say, a challenge? How do we have this challenge? Do we have a tool in house that we can, or a process maybe, that we can use to fix it? Or do we have to look outside of the organization and outside of our existing kit of parts to, bring something else in to help us? So overarching, I think that's the goal, right? It's how do we strategically enable and empower our project teams and bring them either more familiarity with the tools that they have, or help them to bring a new tool that will help them be more efficient, reduce their workload, automate some of the processes that are very mundane that they get to do project after project.
And when you're looking at new technology solutions, how do you stay on top of all of the emerging technologies that there are? Because there's so many now. I can imagine it's probably a bit overwhelming to try and stay up to date with these new solutions and new companies. It seems like popping up every other day or week. Do you have a specific way that you are looking at the market, or is it more on identifying a problem first and then going and sourcing different solutions?
Yeah, so I think it's a community of practice that we kind of create that is doing all of those things, right? It's a combination. It's like looking at, there are certain people that are very passionate about certain technology. So how can we leverage knowledge sharing better? And I think we've started to do that a lot better. But as I mentioned, we're working on this structure for tech use and tech adoption. We've started with our internal tech portal, which we launched earlier, I guess last year. And that's just giving everybody an overview within our organization of what tools we're using or have piloted across the organization, so that they have a little bit more awareness when they're getting approached by a vendor. But we're trying to tackle that vendor management thing right now too. And part of this structure and this enablement, right, is have a call with a vendor or look at a new tool, but let's make sure we're tracking that so that if it is something that we should roll out enterprise wide, that we can do that, right?
Right.
So yes, I think it's, like I said, it's the knowledge sharing aspect is certainly has been the most important. We have a best practices site that we launched during COVID that has really, helped us promote those types of things, and that type of activity. Teams has been, essential to us. And we've created channels for these communities of practice for, we have one that's dedicated to drones and one to reality capture and one to Procore, and the list goes on. So we are constantly improving, but we're trying to make sure that, we have a VDC knowledge network too, that's really actually beyond VDC. It has folks from operations and pre-construction. And I think we're trying to just make sure that everyone is communicating and connected and knows, like, oh, I heard of this thing or this tool that I want to try out. Like, maybe I should contact these people and they can connect me with the right people, or maybe it's project team that's tried it out. So it's a lot of work, but we're working on it. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's exciting. It must
Yeah,
be exciting to, constantly be on the cutting edge of looking at all of the new stuff and being able to
definitely.
work with people on coming up with those solutions.
Right.
On that topic, actually, when you're thinking of innovation and trying to build that innovative culture within your team and within the other
Mhm.
teams that you work with, is there anything that you do in particular to drive? I mean, you're clearly an innovator yourself, but how do you bring others along for that journey and get other people interested in the work that you're doing and see the benefit? Have you ever had struggles with that, or different ways that you've kind of embraced that culture more broadly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's always been a struggle for me. I think my entire career, I was like walking around with the iPad early on, and people are like, "I don't understand what you're doing. Why are you here?" So that like aha moment that you can give a superintendent when he can like spin the model around on his side was always like very rewarding for me. But I think really, getting on the level of our projects teams and understanding their challenges, and actually beyond our project teams, our partners, our design partners, our engineer partners, our subcontractors. I think that's somewhere actually we lack and we could do a better job of. But truly understanding what the problems are so that we can solve them is the approach that I like to take. I think, and to make sure that we're highlighting those challenges and those solutions that we've come up with,
Right.
because people may not always say they like recognition, but I think it's important to recognize those things, even if it goes unnamed. It doesn't have to have a name associated with it. But look at this great thing we did, and to celebrate those small victories. Um, we've created this network. I'll call it our tech concierge network of folks from across all different departments. As I was saying, like our VDC knowledge network, or something even more extended. It has IT and our project analytics team and our pre-construction team. And these are people that are really aware of all of the tools that we're using across the organization. And so we just make sure that we're well connected to that group, I think, and then in turn connected to our operations teams so that they are truly seeing the benefit of all the things. And I honestly think that that's something that we can all improve on. I think we're continuing to do that by putting ourselves on site, understanding the challenges, and then making sure that we're helping them get to a solution in an efficient way.
Yeah, and I'm sure having the background in project coordination and in BIM management and in project management probably helps, because you can really relate to the challenges that people are bringing forward and probably
Yes,
empathize a little bit more with them,
very
or at
true.
least have that common ground. It's not like, someone coming in and not having that shared context.
Right. Yeah, I think, speaking to them in layman's terms is always something I have to remind myself. We all use acronyms all the time, and we talk about all these things that are, technology, and I have to remind myself, be like, all right, we're talking to somebody who is building a building, and I want to make sure that they understand what I'm talking about. And I'm not just talking about this thing that's like up here in the clouds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Make it
yeah,
relatable.
exactly.
Have you seen any change with technology demand during the pandemic? Has that influenced how people are using technology within the industry or how people are relying on it?
Definitely. I think we saw just such an uptick in tools like Struction Site, where we needed access to the project, but we may not have been able to get the whole project team there. And that's including the owners and the architects. So, 360 cameras and virtual tours, and just even high quality meetings like we're having via Zoom or WebEx,
Right.
where we were all over the place. And we had an event in Boston this week, and one of our PMs said to me, I never realized how beneficial all these tools were until I was stuck at home trying to figure out what was happening on my job site. Right. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Like, how can we continue to work together to do that more? And so I think that just really has opened up some of their minds too towards like, oh, they're not just coming to my job to try to sell me on something new, but really to figure out how to improve the work that we're doing.
And how much time when you're rolling out a new product or a new process, are you often going and doing that in person on the site and meeting with those teams? I mean, COVID aside, is that typically, is it more of that hand in hand sort of process?
It depends on what the tool or technology is, but yeah, I think oftentimes we do want to enable our project teams. We usually have pretty eager like assistant supers or PEs who are young. They have a lot of knowledge of technology out of school. We're seeing a lot of programs, especially in our Boston area, but even beyond, like nationally, that are offering so much of this coursework as part of their training before they get here. So we have folks that can open models and navigate through them, and they're learning about data, and so they're all sorts of backgrounds, but we try to really connect with that network of folks and make sure that we're training them up. They're usually the ones that want to fly drones and are interested in thermal cameras, or whatever the latest and greatest technology is.
So one thing, just shifting gears a little bit, one topic that it seems like everyone in the construction industry is talking about right now is the shortage of talent entering
Mm,
the industry, and
yeah,
how, there's a huge group of people from the construction industry that are retiring, and there's not enough young people entering the workforce. And so that's kind of an interesting topic, and it's obviously a big problem in terms of keeping the construction industry alive and well.
right.
Anything that you would say to anyone young who's thinking of a career in the construction industry? I feel like often the industry doesn't get enough credit. I think when we started our company, a lot of outside people said, "Oh, construction, you're never going to sell a technology product into construction. That's a theoretical idea. It's never going to work in
Right.
practice." And then when we went actually and talked to people on site, it was the complete opposite reaction, where people were saying, of course we want to use technology, of course we want to do these new things, and people were actually incredibly innovative but didn't really get the credit for it.
Right.
So I think a lot of people have maybe a skewed perception of construction being this less innovative or less attractive industry, when at least I don't feel like it's that way. So just curious your thoughts on what would be attractive to someone who's early on in their career to enter the space.
Yeah. So I would recommend looking for companies that have like rotation programs.
Yeah.
We have one where they can actually sit in each department, and that's accounting and pre-construction. They're in the field, and then they're in the project management, and then the VDC rotation as well. We found some really good, just well-rounded talent comes out of those programs. So I highly encourage anyone. I wish I had that when I was, coming into the industry too. And like I said, I had to kind of do that on my own. But so yes, definitely look for those rotation programs, figure out how you can get the most exposure possible to all the different departments and opportunities. Other things like we have this Project Connect initiative, which is set up to create some transparency around each of the different roles. So folks can see, like, maybe if I'm an accountant, but I decide I want to be a PE, like, what is that going to take? So
Right.
um, definitely look for that. And then I would say, don't ever be afraid to get field experience, especially if you think you want to go into like more of a technology role, but within the construction industry. They're a little harder to find, I think. They all have different titles, and you know, might see something VDC that's combination of models, but also technology. You know, that's where the VDC people tend to morph into those roles, as I know you know. But yeah, just try something out. But the field experience is so important, and brings just so much more credibility to those who are trying to roll out technology.
Yeah, I agree. That definitely makes sense. Did you ever find it when you were early on in your career, were you ever intimidated that you didn't have that field experience yet? Like what
For
was it
sure.
like when you were first, on site and it was your first time? I feel like that would be overwhelming.
It was so overwhelming. I was thinking about this when, in just prepping for this, I forgot. I was sent out to do punch lists on a ton of our projects.
Oh,
Fresh set of eyes, an architect, they would send me out with a roll of drawings, and I would go out and just do a really thorough punch list. And I would make all of our subcontractors very angry because they were looking at us and I was critiquing every outlet, like every inch of their work. And they're just trying to scramble and finish and get out of there. And I'm looking at this like, what do I do? I'm taking a picture. And so I would create these like very thorough punch list documents where I would scan in my drawings, my markups, and in Excel, I would track everything and send it off to the team. But yeah, I always remember being intimidated, and I took advantage of, like I said, those other leaders, I guess, that I was working for, and tried to have them take me around, and took advantage of any walkthroughs that they would take me on. Um, I met some really great superintendents who taught me really about means and methods and how things went together. Like I remember one sitting at my desk, and then he would show me in the field, right? We learned how to, or he taught me how to build a slurry wall, like how it's constructed, because I was actually building a logistics model for in planning for a project we were going after. And
right.
so I didn't understand how that all went together, but and then he taught me about like up down construction versus up construction, like all those things I was being exposed to, but I really didn't know what they meant. Um, and so yeah, it was intimidating, but I tried to, you know, follow those who were very comfortable and learn from them as I went to make it a little less intimidating.
I had a similar experience because my two uncles own a construction business. So when I was in
Um,
college, I worked for the family business just as a summer student.
yeah.
And their theory, because I was studying engineering, their theory was, well, take a young engineering student and just put them on site and have them get that field experience. And I remember showing up being like, oh my goodness, I do not know what's going on. I had my
Yeah.
hard hat and my steel toed boots. And I worked on a variety of sites like throughout that first summer. And it was the best experience. Like once I got over just being like feeling very out of place
Right.
and just not knowing what I was doing. But I think, yeah, just embracing all the different people and asking lots of questions, I built so much confidence over that first summer because I
Totally.
learned so many different things and kind of figured out how everything came together, which it is really important.
Definitely.
Speaking of that, did you have any mentors early on in your career or now, or how have
Yeah.
you continued to learn, I guess?
Yeah, I think mentors and even sponsors have been really important, but I would say that they've evolved. Sorry, my dog is going crazy. Um, they've evolved throughout my career. I had one, I would say, where I first started, who was an architect that came to the construction side. He was actually hired after working on projects with the contractor, and he just taught me everything he knew, and it was awesome. And then later on at that same company, I had another mentor who I would say got me my job at Massport and just said, "This would be a really good career move for you. You should think about it." Um, and so, yeah, I think you know I stress like I think mentors, it's funny, we have, you know, formal mentorship programs, but
Mhm.
I think it needs to come naturally. It needs to be someone that you feel comfortable with approaching and asking questions. I think also I always tell mentees that you need to give it as much as you want to get out of it too. So make sure that because your mentor, and this happens to me now, like I learn a lot from the folks that I mentor, just through our conversations. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Or and I think I also said this recently at a Skanska event. We just had a mentor program that we rolled out through our Skanska Women's Network, and I was like, I am at a point where I think I could use a new mentor, and so again, I think it evolves, but it's really important.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely does. The best mentors do happen more organically. And I feel like it's often a variety of people that you end up meeting
Yeah,
throughout time that are kind of helpful for different aspects and different questions that you would have.
right.
Okay, final question for you, and then I will let
Okay.
you go. You've given us lots of great advice for people who are in the industry, or people who are thinking of joining the industry. Do you have any final thoughts for someone who maybe is in a project management or project coordinator role or some field-based role and looking to get more into the technology side of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say they should, I think there's a lot of secret innovators out there. Like you said, there's our industry is truly innovative, but they don't know where to start and they don't know who to talk to. So I would encourage them to find those people within their organizations who are maybe VDC or rolling out technology already, and connect with them and figure out how you can help. Um, we're always looking for those champions that live in the field and are the boots on the ground, and really the problem solvers day to day. And so I am really eager to connect with them at my company, and I'm sure that there's someone like me at their organization who is also like, hey, let me help you. And I want to see so many of them. Like, I would love to have any PM who's like, I'm tech savvy, I want to be on your team, come to our team. Right,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
their experience is going to be invaluable. So yeah, just try to connect with those people, or and if it's not your company, if you're not seeing that happen, connect with folks in the industry through networking. And they exist, we exist, we're looking for people who want to join the emerging tech side of things.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. Just putting your hand up and looking for those innovative companies and companies that have a real tech agenda like Skanska,
Yeah,
as being probably the places to be.
definitely.
Thanks so much for joining us, Danielle, and for all of your
Yeah,
advice. I feel like in the construction world, it's hard sometimes to find advice, and it is a very unique industry. So I think this is very helpful for anyone who's in the construction industry looking to join or looking to progress and to grow a successful career like yours.
definitely. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks. Talk soon.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.